Hi, Julie. Welcome to the Seasons of Motherhood series.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Oh, it's a pleasure. I am so glad to finally meet you. I mean, I know we briefly met just one time, but we've been going back and forth with some emails, and it's nice to see your face and be able to have a conversation with you. And I'm so thankful that you're willing to share some of your story. I know so many people will just be so encouraged and blessed by what you have to share with us today. So we're thankful for that. So I'm just going to give a little background on who you are so people have a little bit of an understanding. So first of all, it's Dr. Julie Tiessen. You served with your husband, Dr. Douglas Tiessen, as a missionary at the Christian and Missionary Alliance in Russia for a decade in the 90s. After studying language at the Cuban State University and gaining proficiency, you taught at the Cuban Evangelical Christian University, where your husband, Doug, also served as an academic dean. They were appointed as field director for a team that had grown over 40 missionaries and served in the capacity until their return to Canada in 2001. Julie has worked as a district missionary consultant for 2 church districts here in Ontario. And her husband, Doug, was appointed Assistant Vice President for Global Ministries of the Christian and Missionary Alliance in Canada, located in Toronto. And you have 2 sons, Josh and Zach. So there we go, a little bit of an introduction to you. So first of all, I think what I'd love to do is talk a little bit about your educational background I just spoke about in your bio, and maybe how that unfolded in your life and how you felt kind of called into missionary work. Maybe you can share with us.
Well, it goes right back to when I was 11 in a Pioneer Girls Club. We had a missionary come and speak, and there was a circle of about 30 girls. And at the end, she said, "Is there's anyone here who would be willing to go as a missionary if God called them? Would they stand?" And so I stood.
Wow.
And I was the only one who stood. So I always
Wow.
remember that night. And that was the beginning of my journey to becoming a missionary. Of course, there was other options along the way. I thought I might be a teacher or a psychologist.
Right.
But God had his hand on me, and I went on a few mission trips, and that really sealed the deal for me.
Wow.
So it was kind of a no-brainer when it came to what I was doing after high school. I went and got a Bachelor of Biblical Studies, and then I followed that with a Master of Divinity in Cross-Cultural Studies to prepare.
That's amazing. So tell me then how you met your husband maybe, and how you guys connected together to choose this missionary journey before you had children.
Okay. Well, I was determined not to meet a husband at Canadian Bridal College.
Yes, I heard that term.
Yes, yeah, Bible college.
Yeah.
So I held out till about 6 weeks before grad, and then we were part of the same friendship group of, missionary candidates, people who were heading to the mission field.
Right.
And so it was kind of logical. We kind of all paired off, and Doug and I paired off, and it was like, you know what? I think this would be great going together as missionaries. So God led us together, obviously.
That's very, very special. So let me see. You talk a lot about Russia and the early beginnings. So was that your first missionary journey together as a couple and then as a family?
Yes, it was just around the time in the late 80s when the Berlin Wall came down and things really opened up in Russia and Eastern Europe. So our mission was considering sending missionaries in, and they connected with a group of new churches with just young, uneducated pastors who were asking for people to come and provide theological education. So we were invited in as a mission, and Doug and I were the first of the missionaries to be appointed and go and be part of this new team to run.
That is incredible. So that must have been quite the experience, being kind of the new people starting this new missionary experience. How did they receive you, especially because you were learning the language as well? I'm assuming you didn't know Russian before you went. So how did that all play out for you while you were there?
Well, we did take a crash course at the University of Saskatchewan in Russian, about 6 weeks, very intensive course. So at least we would something.
True.
And then we studied at the Kuban State University in southern Russia, studied full time with the language we were supposed to study for a year, but the Russians were like, okay, a year and a half, good enough. You guys are speaking well, come and teach.
Really?
So it was challenging. It was very challenging to teach at a bachelor's level in our second language. So we would prepare a manuscript ahead of time, and
yeah.
I would practice on the ironing board with our Russian nanny listening to me and helping me. She was very educated, so she was very able to help me. And we'd sort of pray that nobody asked any questions, because our language level would, drop a few levels once we had to just go off the cuff. But the students were very thrilled to be taught in their own language, because they'd had a lot of Westerners come in and teach through translators. So this was really great. Yeah. So we were able to train young pastors, missionaries going to every part of the world. Wow. Also drug and alcohol rehab center workers, orphanage directors, every kind of ministry, camps. Like a lot of the communist camps have gone defunct, so they'd been bought up and turned into Christian camps for children and young, teens and adults. So, we were able to train all these people who were very young. I mean, we were young ourselves. We were under 30 when we went, and yet these young pastors and ministers were, in their early 20s. I mean, they were young.
Yeah, so. They must have just received you with such a joy, thinking, wow, like we have this amazing opportunity to learn and then to be able to go out and serve. And I suspect, maybe I'm wrong, but you probably didn't go over there thinking, well, I'll probably be involved in 10 or 15 or maybe even 20 different types of, community service or different works. I'm sure things unfolded in a very surprising way for you.
Exactly. It was just, what the students, who came to us at the Bible college we were teaching at. And we even had a few Orthodox priests who wanted to make a difference from within the Orthodox Church. And we keep up with all of these students on Facebook still.
That's
and they're spread all over Russia and all over the world. So it's a real joy.
Oh, that is so amazing. So let's just kind of weave a little bit now into Josh and Zach being there with you. So talk about how it was for you in your academic environment and having 2 young children to raise.
Right. Well, we had been 7 years married and hadn't been able to have children. So I wasn't really sure I would become a mom. Right. But during language study, I got pregnant the first time, and then got pregnant again very quickly. And so I had 2 babies 13 months apart.
They're very close in age. So
yeah. My husband joked with the Russian doctor in Moscow. He said, "Oh, we'll be back next summer." And she laughed. And then we were.
And you were?
Yeah.
That's
and she came in and she said, "Oh, I knew it was that Canadian woman, because, the Russian women are so much braver."
Oh boy, that's funny.
So, I figured we were paying for it, so I could holler as loud as I wanted.
You left your mark, and you're allowed to do that.
I did. Yes. So we just incorporated our children into what we did. We did have a Russian nanny, and she was a professional, like a kindergarten teacher, and also a plastics design engineer. She was just a really smart cookie. And she could make more working for us as a nanny than she could in her other careers. So she just like a second mother to my children. And we just co-parented, and she made it possible for me to still teach and to have these, babies to nurse and then run off to teach, come back. And, she was so respectful of me, made sure, she'd get them all ready and then let mom do the, putting to bed or she was just great, and we still have a friendship to this day. And she still considers Josh and Zach her boys, and she follows everything they post on Instagram.
That is very special. That is so beautiful. Just the fact that you had such a connection with her to literally, as you said, co-parent, but yet she still gave you that beautiful, nurturing, mothering spirit, and were able to do that with your own children. That's really beautiful.
Yeah. I loved working from home. And I didn't realize at the time that was really homeschooling as well. I was a reluctant homeschooler, but that's really what I was doing right from the start.
Yeah. So you ended up staying there for a period of time and ended up making your way back to Canada. So talk a little bit about that, because that is kind of where the unexpected homeschooling journey probably really began, was really in Canada, even though you were doing a lot of the homeschooling already. But maybe talk about that transition to Canada, and then maybe a little bit of how this unfolding journey of homeschooling kind of happened.
Okay. So we were called into further mission leadership. We'd been field directors for a group of over 40 missionaries. And then they asked my husband to kind of go in a succession plan to be the VP of Global Ministries for the mission. So the headquarters for Canada was in Toronto. So we relocated to Burlington. He also took a PhD, became an ethnologist. And I also took a doctor of ministry in leadership studies, with concentrating on leadership, overseas leadership. So we did that. I also was a mission consultant during that time. Josh and Zach were 5 and 6 when we returned from the mission field. And somebody anonymously paid for them to go to Burlington Christian Academy for a few years. So that was kind of a soft landing for them, which was kind of nice.
Yes.
Because they'd never lived in Canada.
No,
and so,
brand new.
You know, it was great having a Christian school and the support of that community. And so that was the first few years that we did that. But then my husband and I started traveling again all over the world. And they wanted to travel with us because they were used to that life of travel and adventure. And they wanted to go. So they really were the ones that convinced me in grade 3 and 4 to homeschool them so they could travel with us.
Wow. They must have been some pretty good, navigating the system of, Mom, I want you to do this. Dad, can you do this? I mean, that's a big decision to make, to take them on the road with you. I know I've heard of people throughout the years that have done that as well, but it's a big decision to make because you're removing them from the Christian school environment, the only other thing they really knew in Canada, and then back to the road. However, you know that in their heart, their roots are, let's go. Let's get out and explore the world. Let's see what's going on with God's creation and how can I incorporate this, as we'll talk about later, into their own professions right now, right? That has laid a foundation for sure.
Yeah. Well, we had always traveled with them, even in Russia and in surrounding countries. They'd gone with us. We would have to go out once a year to get our visas renewed, our working visas. So we'd go to Helsinki, Finland, or Cyprus. Wow. They were just used to all this exotic life. I mean, Josh had been on 20 planes by the time he turned 2. Really? So they were just used to that life. So when we came back to Canada, they're like, seriously? Like, we're going camping? And
no.
They liked camping, but on the other hand, they were used to travel, and their classmates were going to Disney World, and so we took them to Disney World so they could say they'd been, and they didn't really like it.
No,
because they were used to
the place that we want to be. It's not where we
They said they went through the It's a Small World After All, ride, and they're like, well, we've been to that country and we've been there. So they wanted to travel. So they took about 6 months to finally convince me. And I said, we'll try it for a year. We'll see how this goes.
Okay. Yes. So when you said, okay, we'll try it for a year, how long did that travel actually take then? Were you traveling for, I can't remember how many years, because you do talk about it in the blog post, but I don't remember how many years you traveled before you came back and actually planted and rented and
Okay. Yeah. Well, we came back and we were traveling across Canada and the States doing a lot of speaking, and the boys would come with us and do the whole missionary song and dance on Russia, about Russia. Yeah. And they loved that. But then once we started, the mission wanted us to get to each of the 4 major areas of the world that they were had missionaries in, to visit missionaries. So that's when we started traveling. And the plan was, to start taking Josh and Zach more. And then, of course, homeschool allows for that. And we just crafted everything around it, like geography, history, the arts. We just really incorporated them into what we are doing with our travels.
Well, that sounds beautiful. I have a quote here that I absolutely love. You talk about how you said, I love how God has a sense of humor and a knack for bringing beauty out of ashes. And I think there's probably a lot in that you could talk about. But, and I know that has to do with coming back to Canada and a variety of different things that were happening in your family. So I will encourage the listeners right now, you need to go read her blog post because there is so much in here. I had trouble narrowing down the quotes that I wanted to use and how we were going to cover all of this in 20 or 30 minutes. But I'm going to try my best, but you need to do that. Go and listen to her or to read the blog post after you listen to her today. So what do you mean by this bringing the beauty out of ashes?
Well, what I didn't mention is that my husband contracted Lyme disease when we were in the last couple of years. We were in Russia. We lived in a homes there came with guard dogs, and the last one we had would go hunting with its owner and come back full of ticks. And we didn't really know at the time. I just kind of knew, like, pulling those ticks off the dog, you could maybe get some sort of illness. And so, long story short, my husband started with symptoms, and the nanny eventually got Lyme disease. All of us eventually got Lyme disease, presumably from the dog and the ticks.
Right.
So it lay dormant in some of us a little longer. So, but Doug, he was working sick. We were traveling. He was sick. I mean, he went through 18 specialists over 10 years before he got finally diagnosed. So he was off work by 2006 and didn't know it would be a permanent disability, long-term disability. So, our life kind of ran aground. And I mean, going from traveling, adventure, I talked about with the boys, to being, as Josh called it, stuck in Canada. So, suddenly, and we kind of fell off the missionary map, those maps that used to hang at the back of churches with the little pins, when we were no longer missionaries, no longer with the mission, no longer in leadership, we kind of fell off the map. And so it was very, very dark, lonely years for us. So the verse that emerged in those years was Isaiah 61:3. And it says, on those who grieve, God will bestow a crown of beauty instead of ashes, and the oil of joy instead of mourning, and a garment of praise instead of the spirit of despair. So in those years when we were kind of despairing, that was a verse that we really saw coming to life, especially through our children, because we felt like our lives were kind of in ashes. We called ourselves the deadbeat doctors. Like, great to have all this education, and now
what?
Now what? But it was really interesting, because that's when our boys' lives started really taking off, and it was just like beauty from ashes. And so that's kind of how God helped us reframe it, and the blessing that we'd seen on our family and on us and our ministry. People said we did more by 40 than most people do their whole missionary career.
True.
So and now we saw that blessing being kind of transferred over to our boys, and beauty coming out of ashes.
Actually, let's talk a little bit about Josh and Zach. So as you would probably consider yourself a bit of a reluctant homeschooler, it wasn't something that you set out to do. So maybe you can talk a little bit about how you were able to transition into some homeschooling with Josh and Zach, and there's a beautiful quote here too, that I wanted to read quickly. And it says, in spite of our haphazard hand-me-down homeschooling, which you described so beautifully, it's such an incredible story here, Julie. As it turned out, they had soaked up everything I'd put in front of them, and they would be just fine, because this is when they were entering into high school and beyond. Other homeschoolers I've talked have found that theirs were too, all that worrying for nothing. So that to me really stood out, because I know as a homeschooling mom, you worry, am I doing enough? And it makes people be reluctant homeschoolers, because I could never do that. Are you kidding? I'm not a teacher. I'm not this. So what do you think it was with you that you kind of went from reluctant to release almost?
Well, I think, initially, I'll be honest that I think I say it in the blog as well. It was financial reasons. We didn't have continued financial support at the Christian school after we were no longer technically missionaries. So it was kind of like, if I want to continue their Christian education, I'm going to have to do it myself. And I was very intimidated. I had taught adults and I felt comfortable with that. But I'll be honest, I'm not really a natural mother. And, it took reading books and trying to figure this out for me, how to do this. It just didn't come naturally. And so, homeschooling didn't really come naturally either. So I quickly resourced myself and surrounded myself with good homeschooling moms. I was part of a Charlotte Mason homeschooling group for moms. For once a month, we'd get together and talk about, Charlotte Mason philosophy, turn of the century educator who, her whole thing was, and we still have this little thing framed that says, education is an atmosphere and a discipline and a life. And so that's what I just kind of went by. Like, let's just go with this, make education an atmosphere, discipline, and a life. So we just rolled it into life, whatever we were doing with our ministry, or whether it was getting sick and visiting doctors. I mean, the kids came along for the ride. So we just incorporated our life into homeschooling, and it worked for us. And we saw the boys thrive, even when things were really haphazard, during moves or during sickness, during hospitalizations. The boys just, we tried to incorporate that into their learning. Often we would be toting homeschooling textbooks and workbooks with us places. And it seemed really like I was worried, will we cover everything? I mean, how are we going to make sure they're on par with the kids at school, But you don't realize that, your kids are getting a much richer, broader education than the kids in school are. So, even the worst homeschooling mom, I think, is better than the educational system. That's just my own, feeling, but because I felt like I wasn't stellar, but our kids were soaking it up. The kids generally do. And, maybe they didn't learn everything, but they'll learn it later, what they need to learn, that where there's holes in your little system.
Because there will be holes in the system. And I think that's the burden that we carry, that we'll never be enough. We'll never do enough. We won't provide the math or the science or the language arts. And you know what? We all have our skill sets. And I know for a fact, I was very worried, and still am. I still have one left, and she's going into grade 8. And you still wonder, like, mathematically, is she going to be okay? Because it's not our family's strong suit. So that's always, it weighs on me heavily. But then you realize as the kids get older, you do see that they go into their own way, and things do become, they become aware of things better later and learn things on their own, in their own way. And you just do the best that you can.
Exactly. Like Josh has taken an interest in zoology and botany. And so, we didn't spend a lot of time on science. I wasn't sciencey. So, I mean, the boxes are almost untouched from high school, the science kits, but we did a lot in elementary. But by the time high school came, they weren't interested, and I wasn't into it. So but you know what, he's figured it out as an adult. As long as you teach them how to learn, they're going to learn whatever they need to know as adults,
and then it will fit into their mold. So we can talk a little bit more about what Josh and Zach are doing in a little bit, but what would you say is kind of the most fruitful part of your homeschooling? I mean, perhaps we've already answered that in some part, but what would you say has been your most fruitful part? What would you think?
Well, I think, like what I say in the blog, doing life together. I think that's fruitful. Also, using other resources, other adults who have, the science that you don't, or the math. Using other resources in the community, really connecting your kids to other people, both adults and kids their age, and not feeling like you have to do it all yourself. So it was a joy to see them learn from other people.
It really is, isn't it? And I find that God just keeps bringing in people at the right time. And I'm sure you can say, and I know you talk about that so much in your blog, about different people loving on you guys and serving you and helping you in so many beautiful and unexpected ways. And I even think about just right now with my youngest, this outdoor education program that we have literally around the corner from our house that has become such a blessing. And it's not me. And I get to take her to this incredible place to learn about God's creation. And she's dramatically changed in her love of creation and the outdoors. And it's actually encouraged her art. So I think, and I'm sure you could speak to that over and over again, the art teachers that came in, or musicians, or people that came alongside of you and noticed Josh and his artistic skills, and Zach and his musicianship. And God just keeps going before us, and it's like we need to just trust that He knows better than we do, because we don't.
And I think it also takes some humility.
Yes.
Humble enough to accept help and not feel like I have to do it all myself. And or I have to buy all the best curriculum to do all this. No, you don't.
Right. Right. Yeah. Well, I think just before we finish up in the next few minutes, both Josh and Zach are uniquely gifted. And the word prodigy is something that you bring up in here. In fact, you talk about a documentary that was done called, is it The Prodigy? It's called The Prodigy.
Prodigy Brothers.
Prodigy Brothers. So
Yeah.
I have not seen that yet, but that
Okay.
is on my list to watch. But I did watch the quick little intro that was done.
Okay.
So I'm very excited about that.
It's on YouTube now for free. It was on Amazon Prime for a long time. Now it's just on YouTube for free.
Perfect,
So
because I was actually going to go on Amazon and look
Yeah.
at that.
Oh, you can buy it, but it's on for free on YouTube now. So you just, look
Okay.
up
Awesome.
Prodigy Brothers.
Awesome. So tell me a little bit about this journey of being a mom to prodigies.
Well, when it was the media that first started calling Josh a prodigy when he was 11. He had his first public art exhibition, which we didn't set up. It was an art mentor that wanted the world to see his art. So we wouldn't have thought of setting up an art exhibition for a child, but
No.
so the media started catching his story, and then he was mentored by Robert Bateman after a solo show at Art Gallery of Burlington. And then the media really started rolling with it and calling him a prodigy. And the funny thing is, as educated as we are, we had to look up the difference between prodigy and protege because we weren't really sure.
It's like,
what are they saying? We kind of laughed it off, like we're not taking this very seriously. And we didn't want him to have labels, we don't want our children to have labels either way.
Yeah.
So we didn't really know that and didn't really run with it as much as the media did. But then a prodigy expert, actually the foremost prodigy expert in the world from Ohio State University, discovered Josh through an article we didn't even know about in the Huffington Post in New York, saying he was one of 10 of the top art prodigies in the world.
Incredible.
And
really.
only one from Canada and only male apparently from North America. So there's several females, but
It's incredible.
anyways, so yeah, Doug's cousin, messages him and says, you realize Josh is in this article and there's a little video up and everything about him. And so we're just like, really? Okay. So anyways, so then this woman came and from Ohio State, and she was a psychologist and did a bunch of testing and took DNA samples and confirmed that both actually Josh and Zach are prodigies. We knew that Zach had, he was 16 at the time, and he had composed 16 full-length compositions, and we thought that was a bit strange.
Yeah, it's a little bit different than the norm.
Yeah, and she's like, oh my goodness, we have 2 on our hands here, which is really rare.
It is
2 in
so
1
rare.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So she helped us, actually, this professor. She came back several times.
Good.
And they're a part of a study group of prodigies worldwide who range in age from 2 to 62.
Wow.
And so this woman's helped us a lot to know how to parent our children. So we're thrilled that our boys are part of this groundbreaking scientific study.
It's so groundbreaking. And it's another reminder of community and how important it is to learn from other people, because there are so many experts out there that are going to guide us and give us the wisdom that we need, because you can't parent alone. You need a community. Yeah, just before we finish off, I would love to know a little piece of encouragement that you could leave with a mom today that might be just on the cusp of thinking, I might homeschool. I don't know. Is there something you might say to her today?
Well, I kind of alluded to it earlier that you can't do any worse than the public system, in my opinion, especially in the last few years. I mean, as a Christian, I couldn't put my kids, and I hopefully will not have to see grandkids go into the public system. I think, just homeschooling your children, you can't go wrong as far as, passing on your Christian heritage to them, having the ability to curate not just their subjects, but their friendship groups and the information at different ages that comes to them, the books they read. And I just think, go for it. I mean, if I could do it, anybody can, because I really had no clue at the start. And I just relied on other moms who were more experienced than I kind of latched on to 2 other homeschool moms who were homeschoolers of boys who were into sports, because that's what our guys were into at that point. And so I just learned from them. And I just, copied what other people were doing and used good curriculum, the curriculum I could get my hands on. I just think you can do it. Don't feel like I can't do this. I'm not a teacher. It doesn't matter. You're your child's parent. You know them best.
Yes. It's beautiful. Thank you for sharing that. It really is a leap of faith,
Yeah.
and it's an unexpected leap for, I would say, almost any homeschool mom I've spoken to have said something
Mm.
quite similar, that they were very, it was unexpected. And this would be, say, even 10 or 15 years ago, because I'm now, I think I'm at year 16 or something like that. But it wasn't my plan either. But God knew what was best for our family, and it's every family is unique and different. And God calls us to do something unique and different in beautiful ways. So I think you have done that with your husband and your boys. And it's been a pleasure to chat with you. It's been lovely to meet your son. And I think I just briefly met your husband too, not too long ago, when we were picking up some art. But thank you so much for sharing your journey today. And I encourage everyone to please go read her beautiful blog post and get into more detail about this incredible family and the story that God has brought them through. Truly beauty out from the ashes. So thank you for sharing today, Julie, and I look forward to being in touch soon.
Okay, you're welcome. Thanks so much.